Week 5 recap. I'm 5-0, but let's not make a huge thing out of it. I don't want to go, oh, Rick, you're the best fantasy manager I know. I don't want that. I do not want that. Messing around, I did get lucky. I don't know if I could say lucky, but going into Monday night, I was down big with Devontae and Josh Jacobs against Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Juju, and Darren Waller. I ended up actually winning by a good margin, which is the craziest part. So even if Waller was healthy, I probably still would have won, but didn't even watch the game. I was at a dinner. Then I got a lot of texts, and then I started watching the game, and I won. So anyway, no one cares, and I'm aware of that. So let's go to... But it does, again, as I mentioned last week, it's good for you guys to know you have a winner talking about this thing, because maybe I don't know more than anyone else, but do I know more than everyone else? Maybe, I don't know. Okay, all right, so let's talk about some fantasy football. Let's talk blowouts to closest games. I think it's a format that's worked pretty well. And what I want to give credit to is, this year I'm only doing 2 other leagues, and then I do my league for recaps. This league is probably, I don't know if I could say most competitive, but least blowouts, at least this week. There's always, in my league and the other leagues, there's been 100-point gaps because there were such extreme performances this week. Some guys just performing insanely well, and then some guys who you expect to perform well, so they get started not performing well. So there's been a lot of gaps, but in your league, the biggest blowout was 20 points. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about the 21-point gap between the chairman and... Oh, you know what? There was a 28-point gap. All right. So 28-point gap is the biggest gap. So Team Glory Hole beating Pain Train. You already know what I'm going to say. I've been on Team Glory Hole's bandwagon for this entire season up to this point, and I just am going to continue to do so. What did we talk about last week? We talked about Dalvin Cook and Alvin Kamara getting enough volume where their impact should go up. They should only add value throughout the season because they weren't doing as much with their carries as they could have been doing, and that's what we saw. Dalvin Cook 27.6, Alvin Kamara 29.4. Are these guys top 5 RBs? I would have to say no, even though Dalvin's my RB1. I'd still have to leave them outside of that conversation. But when you have 2 guys who are, top 12 RBs, in my opinion, this is a very, very solid RB group that still leads me very, very high on this team. The bad news is Rashad Penny's injury is an absolute killer. You had a stud on the bench. I would have been starting him honestly over J.K. Dobbins probably, which is crazy. Fortunately for you, the depth was there. This is why we said we're so high on this team, is the depth that you have. This is a big hit to the team, but I don't think it breaks you like it does other teams that didn't have that depth. We can't wait for Tua to get back, for Tyreek to be able to be that high-end wide receiver 1 guy. But we are happy that the rest of the world is seeing what I saw when I drafted DK Metcalf. And after his bad week 1, DK Metcalf, and maybe week 2 too, DK Metcalf is that guy. And the offense is actually better than a lot of us thought. So all this is to say, Team Glory Hole with a big win to go to 3-2. Still my prediction to win it all. Remember when they win it all that I was on their bandwagon, even when they started slow. Just remember that. Pain Train, lowest points of the week at 114 points. Very disappointing beginning to the season to go to 1-4, especially for a team that has some really big threats, but we just have to talk about some of these starts. Juju, I'm not sure what people are seeing in Juju. I saw him started in every league I discussed. He hasn't had the impact yet. There's too many equal options on that offense, and they're all behind Travis Kelce. Not that you have incredible options, but not a great option. Pickens, a talented guy, but that's not a great offense to have a wide receiver in. He had a solid week this week, 14.3, but because of that wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3 issue, there's reasons to be concerned. The obvious solution is the guys who are injured, but how healthy do 2 older receivers in Keenan Allen and Michael Thomas come back to be? I don't know. That's why I won't make any predictions, and that's why I will not Dunchain Pain Train. I will not be giving a Dunchain to the team that is currently, I believe, last in the standings. I actually didn't look at total. Yeah, last in the standings. There's one other 1-14, but you're pretty far back on overall points. So I refuse. I refuse to Dunchain him. People in the comments want me to. My family's been calling me like, you got to Dunchain Pain Train. I will not. There's too much talent to do that, but we're getting close. Pain Train, you're on my radar. The next biggest blowout was between the lowly. No, I shouldn't say that lowly. It's actually, sorry, it was a 21-point game. It was a chairman against El Grenas. I've been talking about the chairman. My prediction that I made last week was this team will end up 500. I'm going to leave it there. I mean, they're right in the middle of the pack. And 132.48, what is that? That is exactly to the point where you would have beaten Actually, you would have only beaten one other team, but everyone was around there. So you're continuing to be an average team. Fortunately for you, Eckler's the only non-average guy on this offense, 41.4 points. Gigantic for you, but it just wasn't enough because there's not enough firepower. I mean, Devontae Smith, we talked about the ups and downs that you'll see in him. Fortunately, this was a high target week. He didn't turn it into an incredible amount, but he got enough for you to have a respectable performance. But you get Romeo Doubs in there. I mean, he's just not going to carry enough value on his own to be in a wide receiver spot. What I think you need to keep an eye on here with this team is that you're going to see, of course, Jamal Williams go back to not being that guy, unfortunately. So you're going to have to plug in there. Your wide receiver stack team, CeeDee Lamb could go in, take over Dobbs in your wide receiver group, Godwin, Devontae, and CeeDee is like a solid wide receiver group, but the running backs are just too bleh. You have options, Kareem Hunt, Travis Etienne. They could be startable. They're startable, but I just don't think there's enough firepower from the chairman to go above 500. But let me go back to saying the positives in that, like, you have the depth. You have a ton of depth. I think this is a fairly well-managed team. Just the firepower is not enough to match other teams. That's why I'm going to stick with my opinion that you're going to end 500. We're going to stay there, and I'm not surprised by the 132 performance. I think that's right up what we're going to see from the chairman usually. For El Grenos, it's another story. El Grenos is going to 3-2, and they get it behind 153 points, and a lot of this is behind quarterback. You have one of the maybe three quarterbacks that could win you weeks on their own. This week, 30 points from Jalen Hurts, a very, very impressive performance. We talk a lot about the wide receiver group. I just need to give a shout out for Dameon Pierce being the best pick of the draft. I said going into this season, I thought Eli Mitchell was. I'm going to hold to it that he would have been. But at this point, best value, Dameon Pierce. The hype train preseason was real, and the fans are going crazy that Najee Harris was benched, especially in favor of A.J. Dillon, who's a second running back on his team. There's a lot of question marks around that decision, but I think when you really put it all together, you let Najee get back in that lineup. I know it's frustrating. I know he had another bad week, but I think he has to get in that lineup. I think El Grenos does have that firepower, and by firepower, I mean volume. Every position has that guy that gets a ton of volume, having Diggs at wide receiver. You adding in Najee to that RB group with Dameon Pierce. I mean, there's a lot more firepower here. This is a team I could reasonably say could make a run and could win it all. I wouldn't say it's a top 3 team. I'd be surprised if El Grenos wins it all, but I do think this is more of a competitor than the chairman. Okay, enough about those two teams. Let's go to the next biggest blowout, another 20-point game. There were a few of them. This one between Livin' La Vida Yoda and El Captain. As we all know, coming into the season, Livin' La Vida Yoda was my bottom team, but hey, when you have Josh Allen, anything is possible. We've said that before, and that almost did it enough this week. You had enough points to get the win. A very disappointing, bad luck loss for Livin' La Vida Yoda after 161.46 points. Josh Allen on his own, 54.2 points. Very impressive. And the team, of course, got a little bit of an upswing with Melvin Gordon now being that RB1 because of the Javonte injury. But with all that being said, you're just desperately waiting for DeAndre Swift to come back, because I think when DeAndre Swift comes back, with Melvin Gordon now, upgraded to an RB1, I don't care about the Damien Harris injury because I didn't think he was that. He had some good weeks, but I didn't think he was your solution anyway. Listen, there's a lot more to be excited about. I think there's some weak starters in this lineup, but I think Brandon Cooks will pick it up. He was just happened to be in a rare Texans game script that wasn't them coming from behind and having to pass it all the time. Eli Moore, I probably wouldn't lean on, but you're going to get D Swift back. Gallup might end up proving that he deserves a starting spot. It's another team that, listen, I ranked it at the bottom for a reason. I don't think it's going to be a competitor to win it all, but I think they could win some matchups. Josh Allen could win matchups on his own, and I guess I'm not going to dun chain Livin' La Vida Yoda either is the summary and the takeaway here. El Captain, much deserved win, massive win. Saquon Barkley continuing to be that RB1 that you banked on. Justin Jefferson being that wide receiver one you banked on. Mahomes being that quarterback one that you banked on. And Amari Cooper showing you that he's a great value pick to grab. Very bad luck with the Nyheim Hines injury. I think he could have had a very, very big week. And the good news for you is you plug in Stevenson right there after Damien Harris's injury, and you're now talking about a potential RB1. I think this team has some potential to make a run as well. I think this is a better team than Livin' La Vida Yoda, and I think there's a reason you got the win, and the reason that I'm considering you as more of a contender than Livin' La Vida Yoda at this point. Next matchup is between Caesartrons, and we went with Jared. Caesartrons, a very strong team, coming into this week at 3-1, taking a tough loss, still above 500, to a team that needed it a little bit more. We went with Jared, 155.6 points, despite a weak Lamar Jackson week. But both teams did not get good quarterback play, and where we went with Jared stood apart is at the RB position. Fournette, 34, and Breece Hall, 34. Breece Hall could end up being a league winner and a guy that really brings, we went with Jared, through to the playoffs. Because if you didn't have Breece Hall, I'd have a lot of concerns. Ja'Marr Chase underperforming. You have a great wide receiver group, but the tight end position's been disappointing. And ultimately, Fournette also had some question marks coming to this week. But that was your hole, and you filled it. You got yourself another good RB. It was much needed. It was a great, great pickup. I don't know if you drafted or traded for him, but we went with Jared, probably in the rookie draft. We went with Jared, a absolute gigantic week. Not only winning, but showing that they have their RB2 that they need. They got Fournette, Breece Hall, and now Monty. That's all the RB group that you need to, and all I needed to see. We went with Jared, labeling you as a contender. Caesar Trons, we've talked about you as a contender. That's because of the RB group, and I'm going to keep that going. Chubb showing that he's an RB1. And Mixon actually looked better, despite not having a great fantasy day. He looked better this week. So the T. Higgins injury was awful luck. He could have gotten you the win if he was healthy. But I think overall, you don't look too much at this week. I'm not going to identify any holes on the team because I don't think you really have that many. You're going to wait for Dak to get back. And then what do? Do you go Dak or Kyler? That's going to be a fortunate decision that you're able to make. And then also Zeke. Where does Zeke plug in here? You have depth. The buys will not kill you. I do anticipate this team, despite the wide receiver group that I'm not obsessed with, also continuing to be a contender. So what you guys have really right now is 8 really strong teams, 2 1-4 teams that are still, threats. And I think it's just a competitive league overall, as I mentioned, as I led into this. So we're going to finish with the most competitive matchup, which was Untouchables going to 4-1, 150 to 144. The bad news here, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, is he not the starting running back anymore? McKinnon very, very involved. So Clyde Edwards-Helaire stock absolutely plummeting. And the wide receiver gaps that we've talked about with Sutton, good option, but not as great as I think other people because of that offense. And then Adam Thielen, not a fantastic start either. Definitely were exposed a little bit this week, but hey, you had to do this without Jonathan Taylor, and you got yourself a win, and that's saying a ton. And some bench guys, Pollard and Jacoby Myers, showing that they have value as well. So I'm not overly concerned that I don't love Thielen because you could always plug in Hollywood Brown, who's your best value pick, into that wide receiver group instead of flex, which he already is in my head. Then you have a strong group because Sutton as your third option is a very strong third option. And then the question is, in the flex, what do you go with? I probably would personally not go Adam Thielen. I would look towards Pollard or maybe Jacoby Myers, but hey, they both had big weeks. Easy to say at this point. And the other question is, does Jeff Wilson keep his starting position? Either way, it's all a compliment to Untouchables, giving himself a lot of options, going to 4-1. I think it's a threat. I don't think that 4-1 is really not much better than the 3-2 teams that we've spoken about. Especially, I think Glory Hole is still leading this league. I see Caesar on par with Untouchables, but ultimately, it deserves to be over 500, and it is a contender. Paco Libre, a team that just missed out on going 4-1, and I hate to say it, but I potentially like this team more. I don't know why I hate to say it. I don't know either of you, but you got Travis Kelce at tight end, obviously a huge separator. I like Goddard, but Travis Kelce's Travis Kelce. And then you just have so much explosion on your team. Christian McCaffrey, Josh Jacobs, Deebo Samuel, Jalen Waddle once Tua gets back. There's just so much to be excited about if you're this team. Of course, when Jonathan Taylor gets back for Untouchables, that's another story. But hey, this team had to go without Amon-Ra St. Brown, who's similar level to Jonathan Taylor now, which is crazy to say. So I think both these teams were equally handicapped. I think obviously a tough loss for Paco Libre, only losing by 6. But when I'm talking about winning it all, I need explosion, and this team has explosion that I think Untouchables doesn't have. So I'm actually higher on Paco Libre than Untouchables. I'll make the official prediction and take note that Paco Libre will finish higher. Paco Libre will have better rest of season than Untouchables. And that's just another thing I need to hold myself to. I'm taking notes of all my predictions because I think it's so easy to make a prediction and only remember the good ones. So right now, my 3 predictions that I've documented are Chairman at 500, Glory Hole winning it all, Paco Libre having a better rest of the season versus Untouchables. If there's any questions you have, like this team versus this team, or want me to make predictions to hold me to, send it over. But in the meantime, it was a great week 5. Best of luck to everyone. We'll talk in week 6.